All right, hello everyone, and welcome. It is Tuesday, August 14th, and we are here in week 3 now. You successfully completed your second round of assignments, which is the composition for 2D platformer. And also the sound design for 2D platformer. This creates all of the content for both of our games, 2D platformer and Angry Bots. And hopefully, as you were working on your composition for Angry Bots, you understood you encountered the challenges that it might create, the overall approach that this kind of music requires, showing that it is a different approach overall to the composition of the music and how you might build a piece of music or a soundtrack that can be interactive and change according to what's going on the screen. And it also can extend an initial piece of music out to a much larger soundtrack that's necessary. So now that you have created all of the content, the class kind of shifts over to making your music and sound effects work in the game. Here in week 3, we will discuss how you can use the software or audio middleware tool known as Wise, which is an industry standard tool for putting audio and music in a game. Many popular games out there use these tools, and middleware in general is widely used in the industry beyond just audio and music. There's middleware for animation and 2D art and 3D art and characters and motion and physics and networking and gameplay and pretty much most disciplines that are necessary for the creation of the game have a tool that is in between you and the code. So we as musicians are not knowledgeable in how the inner workings of the code work in the game, just as much as the programmer does not understand the inner workings of how our music soundtrack works. So in order to bridge that gap, there are tools like Wise that will allow you to use your music or take your WAV files and do something technical with them, which we will certainly discuss. And on the other end of it, have your audio formatted and ready to go in a way that the game can understand exactly what to do with it. So when you're playing 2D platformer and you hit the space bar and the character jumps and you want to play a jump sound, then how does it actually connect from when they hit a button to actually playing the sound? And we'll kind of go through that overall process. So we start discussing the kind of the technical side of how things work in the game. And we'll have an overview of both your 2D platformer and your Angry Bots projects, and how you'll take your WAV files and get them set up so that when you're actually playing the game, you hear your custom music and soundtrack. There's also a chiptune composition this week. Since there's no brand new game to work on, we're kind of continuing working on our first 2 games. Then we still have a composition that takes us back to sort of the dawn of where audio, or how audio was, not how it was created, but the compositional process and the restrictions in these early formats. So we have a Logic DAW session that is provided with the assignment that has tracks with EXS24 samplers with sounds or presets from sampled from the original Nintendo system and the Famicom system, which was the Japanese original version of the Nintendo. So You will probably recognize a lot of these very kind of classic sounds, and the assignment takes you through the process of composing using the restrictions of the original Nintendo. So that will also be discussed for this week. But let's go ahead and take a look at our submissions for peer review for week 2. We have 2 submissions here for our Angry Bots composition. And a bit different from last week, here we have everything stacked vertically. This means that we have multiple pieces of music all playing together. Compare that against everything for 2D platformer being laid out horizontally. We had intros that played by themselves that eventually transitioned into main loops that played by themselves that then eventually transitioned into endings. You only heard one file at a time, and they sort of switched and rearranged according to whatever was being heard at any one time. And the entire mix was bounced out into an individual file. One intro, one main loop, or one ending each had drums, bass, harmony, melody, all of the instrumentation. Here, as another very common approach, we have a vertical arrangement of your music, where instead of everything horizontally laid out, we have multiple tracks all stacked on top of each other. And I am going to play the part of the computer, mixing all of the layers or individual tracks up and down. So we have our ambient, we have our buzzer action, we have our mech action, spider action, and if I minimize everything here, we see our stingers are also down here. Let's see if I can kind of fit all of this stuff on the screen. I don't need pans. That should work for us. Maybe make it one notch bigger. Ooh, 2 notches. Yeah, that should work. All right. So, we have our 2 submissions. We have our ambient cue, our 3 action cues. Notice that both of these are formatted correctly. They all start at the same time. They all end at the same time. This is going to allow them to loop together. That means more than likely that they are in the same tempo and the same time signature, since the files are the same length. They also should be in the same key so that there are no clashing notes, nothing out of a particular key that is utilized. The biggest thing that can fall apart with this composition is clashing notes and clashing rhythms. So we are going to be listening to the different layers in combination. Hopefully you have taken the chance on your end to do the same thing, preferably with the bounced files that you're turning in. So take the files that you delivered, or hopefully before you deliver them, and either re-import them back into the same session or just create a new blank session and throw them in there and listen to them in the same sort of way. Listen to them all playing together. Make sure that each one of them makes sense when playing against the others. And eventually I am going to bring all of these faders up to unity, and we'll listen to them together. In fact, I do want to see our meter level here. We want to make sure that when all 4 of these are playing together, that it doesn't overload the master output. So we will check that. It looks like they are pretty consistent in their levels, so that no one particular cue is extremely loud and that much louder than another, or one's extremely low. We want to make sure that each cue only contains instrumentation that is unique to that cue. There should be no repeated instrumentation or no well, the exact same instrumentation, the exact same articulation. You might be able to get away with staccato cellos in one and use sustain in another cue. That might be all right. But the exact same instrument doing the exact same performance will just double up everything. The game is going to mix everything for you. You do not have to repeat any instrumentation. Sometimes we'll just hear the ambient is actually bounced into the buzzer or the mech or the spider. It's not necessary. The game's going to do all of that for you. Each cue is going to have its own unique instrumentation. That instrumentation, the action cues need to. We're listening for a strong intensity difference between the ambient and the action cue. So, however strong or loud the ambient cue is, the action cue just needs to be a whole lot louder and stronger and more intense. So that typically means that you're not really all that big and loud in the ambient cue. The ambient cue can have percussion in it. It should sort of kind of foreshadow the rhythm or the pulse of what's eventually coming. So sometimes that is from percussion. Sometimes that is a bass line or an arpeggiator or a gate or a delay or something with a pulse that will give you the sense of the rhythm for the whole piece. It's kind of the ambient cue is the foundation. It establishes kind of the rhythm, the pace, the progression of what's to come. The ambient cue, a good idea for the ambient cue is musical sound design, which is you don't have to use instrumentation in a traditional way. You can have all sorts of fun with reverbs and distortions and effects and delays and reverse and stutters and I don't know, well, all sorts of fun stuff where you're using instruments beyond what they might be traditionally intended for. So the ambient cue should have some change over the course of it. It shouldn't just be one boring pad that sits there and doesn't do much of anything. Or even just one boring pad that does chord changes, but really does just kind of sits there and does nothing else. Just holds like whole notes for long, unending periods of time, waiting for the next chord change. So then, with the action cues, the action cue needs to have action. Needs to bring the action. Needs to bring the intensity. It needs to very much up the overall amount of energy in the particular cue. That's mostly going to come from percussion, or at least initially. Then having a strong thematic instrument for that particular robot, so that you're almost training the player as to knowing which robot's coming after them, because they will hear that particular instrument or that riff or that theme or whatever the idea is every single time they encounter that robot. So something that makes it unique, where in 2D platformer it was more of a focus on making it consistent instrumentation across all of the files. Here you're going to have a consistent composition, which is consistent tempo, time signature, key, and progression. So the underlying notes and composition is going to be consistent, but you can certainly have much more fun with the instrumentation to make that unique from one to the next. So strong percussion, a strong thematic instrument, or multiples that allows the player to obviously identify whichever the robot is. Okay, so I think that's a lot of just kind of overview of what we're listening for. That is formatting, starting and ending at the same time and looping together. Instrumentation, unique instrumentation in each cue and thematic instrumentation that represents the robot. Compositionally, like I said, same pitch, same key, same tempo, same formatting, loops all together. It's not going to clash. And then intensity. We're listening a lot for the intensity difference between ambient and action. Then down here on the stingers, These need to have a strong impact at the front, and then they're going to fade out to silence quickly. These look like they have the correct shape. They maybe could be a little bit louder, but we'll take a listen to them. But they have a strong attack, and then they fade out to silence very quickly. Same thing over here. Watch out for those getting cut off at the end. You want to leave a little bit of room, or you want to leave some tail there for reverb or decay or anything so it actually reaches silence. But same sort of shape. Strong attack and a quick fade out to get out of the way of the actual music. All right. I think that's enough chatting about the overview of it. I think that's all I want to discuss. Let's go ahead and we'll start with the ambient cue. We're not going to listen to every single minute of every single one individually. I'll be listening to different combinations, like bringing up and down different combinations of faders. And then eventually we'll have all of the faders up so that we see what the overall level is and how they all play together. All right. Let me know if you have any questions or comments as we're going along. Let's see here. Oh, hold on. Can't hear. Huh. Hold on. I'll try that. Done in my headphones? There we go. Okay. Sorry about that. I lost audio. Let's see. What about Logic? Does not seem to be playing in the right location. Hold on. What happened to my headphones? Why is everything not coming through my headphones? Hello, Logic. Play. What's going on? It's like coming through my speakers or something. You guys can hear that. Why can you hear that and I cannot hear that? Multi-output, built-in. Let's not use that. There we go. Okay. Whew. Sorry. Technical difficulties. All right. Let's go ahead and take a listen to the ambient cue here. All right, so there's a great kind of laid-back vibe through here. A good establishment of the rhythm. You know what's kind of the groove that's coming up. I'm trying to think of. I wonder if it's like the seventh chords. What chords are you using in this progression? Because there's an element of it that seems a little too laid back and could have a little bit more intensity to it. But let's see what the first buzzer cue does. Yeah, I think it might be the 7th chords, maybe the major 7th that's... Or maybe having... I mean, the strings definitely help bring up that intensity. So... Trying to hear where the new instrumentation is. All right, so the percussion in there? Okay, so the percussion could definitely come up through the buzzer cue. And then I would do something else with the strings instead of just kind of rotating around and around on that same ostinato pattern. Where you could go between some staccato phrases and sustained phrases, and just move off that same pattern of notes overall. Definitely bring up the percussion to provide that intensity, and move the strings around a bit more. Let's bring the ambient cue back in. It's almost like the ambient cue, because it has the stronger rhythm, it almost feels more intense than the buzzer. So maybe you could take the instrumentation from the percussion from the buzzer and use it in the ambient, and then use this rhythm. We'll see how it works with the other ones. All right, let's do the spider cue. Yeah, the drums could come up, and the pads are almost too loud, and the lead line could come up a bit more. Because let's do this. When I go, bring the ambient back up. So we have a strong kind of kick snare pattern here. And when I bring in the spider cue, I hear it being like it adds to the overall mix. It adds to the overall mix, but rhythmically it's very similar, and it's not creating that much change or variation from the original ambient. It feels like it's coming in to support it rather than coming in to dominate it because it's an action cue. Let's bring the mech now. All right, the guitar works very well. This mech cue has some good obvious differences and changes. I would still even say that the drums of each one of the action cues are just so much in the pocket against the ambient cue that you don't rhythmically feel a lot of the changes. Maybe sitting things, well, again, if you move the percussion from the you move the percussion from the buzzer into the ambient, and then had more room to build up from that, and like switch the ambient over to the buzzer, and yeah, just emphasize, maybe have something on more of an eighth note, just emphasizing some of the areas around that main rhythm that's established in the buzzer. Then something else I would say would be that the string that I hear in this mech cue is almost the thing that I was thinking about or intending for the buzzer, where this string part is pretty consistent. As I said, it was kind of sitting there on the same idea. Well, take that that string line from the mech, bring it over to the buzzer so that the buzzer is mainly strings. Then the mech can be mainly guitar and like just rock and metal heavy, maybe some synths in there, or just have that be rock and then the spider is all synths. So you're having very identifiable instrumentation for each one of the cues. Because this has got a good, a strong lead line. It is kind of far back, but yeah, to kind of compartmentalize the instrumentation for the different cues. So let's bring it all together. So you are going to need to watch the overall levels when, like I'm not actually going to bring this up to Unity, but let's see, how far do I have to go before it goes into red? No? It's pretty on. Let's see. Then never mind. I think, yeah, as long as you tested it and you made sure that it stayed below 0, then forget what I just said. But for everybody, it's definitely a good thing to listen to them all together. And also hear what stands out, what gets lost in the mix, if anything, like that. Where the snares hit and all the rhythms hit when these combine together. Yeah, and what you kind of focus on overall. So, very good. I think, like I said, everything fits together very nicely. I think that you have all of the elements that are necessary. It might just be reconfiguring them a bit, maybe adding a few ideas or moving them around. But everything's formatted well, nothing really clashes. It all like rhythmically works well and loops well together, so you definitely have hit the mark on all that stuff. Didn't know how big to start. You mean at, in the ambient queue? Yeah, that might be something is paring back the ambient queue so that you have more room for action in the action cues. Now, another thing to your composition and just everybody in general is that we are listening to it differently in the DAW than you generally will hear it in the game. Like, it's doing the exact same thing, but here we're listening to it in a longer period of time, sort of under a microscope, and without the rest of the sound effects in the game, and listening to the action cues for much longer. Typically, the action cues are in and out within 30 seconds or so. So the experience of hearing it in the game might certainly be different overall. So, and you will definitely have that opportunity to check it out this week and while you were getting everything working in the game. All right, 3 stingers. Like I said, they might be a little low in volume compared to what you have intensity-wise. Cool. See if I can zoom in a little bit. All right, I'd say these two sound too much like a sound effect. That one might be interesting as the sort of modulation layer. I often describe these stingers as having a strong hit or impact, then some sort of interesting modulation layer on top that is either synths or filtering or delayed or something with a whole bunch of reverb on it, or all sorts of different approaches for that. But those two kind of layers, something in the low end, something in the high end, something with a strong impact that kind of hits you across the face, and then something that kind of moves and changes over time that sounds interesting. So this has definitely got the cool kind of modulation filter pitch ramp thing happening. Could have a little bit more power overall. Oh, come on. Stop playing. But yeah, these could head more in that sort of direction also. I'm a huge gamer, so this will be awesome in the end. Cool, I need to play more games. It's the only thing I do outside of music and homework. And work, of course. Yes, all of the important things. You still have to make time for checking out the industry that you might be interested in, certainly. Keeping up with all of the newest and latest stuff going on. All right, so good things to start with there. We had a lot of different points to discuss. Let's try the next one here. Again, we'll start with ambient. I think we're ready to go. So interesting layers to work with. You got pad in the background, the arpeggiated bass. We have cool, interesting panning elements going on, a little hi-hat in there. You might have something with a little bit more change over the course, like over the course of the cue, where you have interesting sounds established from the start. They remain very similar all the way through. Like progression changes, but the instrumentation stays similar. So whether it is using some sort of filter on that low bass that opens it and closes it, whether it's another instrument that just kind of has another cool arpeggiated pattern that then fades in and out over time. So yeah, something to create that variation in the ambient cue, because it is going to play throughout. All right, let's bring in the buzzer cue. All right, so we got what feels like a kind of a pad and string combo, bigger percussion. I think another bass. Let's take out the ambient here. The bass was in the ambient. Right, the only thing here might be some really kind of thin line in a higher register that is the outline of a melody, just like long sustained whole notes. It kind of offsets the thump, bump, 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 the quarter note stabs there. All right, let's bring back the ambient cue. bring the spider in. Oh, actually, before I do that, not yet, is that loop. It drops suddenly in that octave. So, something probably to tie it back right at the very end there so that I know it's headed back there. Alright, here's the spider cue. So, string line and like the harmonic line passage and the lead line work well together. The choir works well, but this almost feels like an interlude or something. Especially since I'm playing it by itself. But it still needs percussion. It needs that intensity. You have the kind of harmonic intensity. But the kind of power from the rhythm, so it's not just left up to these two layers. And maybe it's because we're just coming from the from the buzzer cue. So just maybe this is just big low drums hitting on the bar or every half bar or something like that. Bum, bum, bum. Just big rolls and large percussion with a whole bunch of reverb. All right, let's try the mech cue. I like the rhythm. I like the power from it. Although, let me bring back the spider. The instrumentation seems a little low or far back in the mech cue. And again, maybe it's because I came from the spider. It's like I heard the percussion in the buzzer and was wondering where the percussion was in the spider. Then I heard the kind of thick, sort of full range element of the strings in the spider, and then I switch over to the mech and it feels a little thin. So I don't know if that's just mix. Like you said, it's kind of hard to get all these elements working together. A lot of them are very wide frequency bands, the synths, the string ensembles. So maybe it's a little bit of EQ, cutting out the different layers, like just taking everything below 80 hertz on any synth and sample or like string library and rolling it off to leave room for low end of kicks and drums. And then the other thing that is throwing me off of the mech is the loop. You didn't, feels like in the mech there it didn't finish the rhythmic phrase or whatever it was trying to do there. Here in the chat, I can add a few more sounds as a layer. I did happen to add a few, had a few to my possibles list. Excellent. Yeah, so I think it's, where'd my mouse go? There it is. Yeah, I think it's a bit of that consistency between the different layers, meaning that You have the rhythm established in the buzzer cue, so you need to have that across all 3 cues. And of course, still making room to have it all fit. And then same thing with a little bit wider frequency from the mech cue. Or make the mech cue the biggest one and then step the other ones back because of the expectation and the kind of size of the robot. So let's bring them all in together. The most interesting thing when they're all playing together is definitely the strings, and that string line works very, very well. And the drums, where's that? Yeah, I guess the drums of the mech. So again, very, very good job in the formatting of it. Everything fits together. I would say everything loops together except for that one mech. I didn't really, or else I didn't catch it in the other ones. Watch the overall levels. Let's bring us up. Yeah, so it could come down 3 or 4 dB probably to give it room for all of them to work together. Yeah, what else? We identified a few things in each one of the cues. The kind of balancing out it's more the function, because you have all the parts. It's just, like I said earlier, rearranging them, making them fit in the different areas, maybe adding a layer or two to the different cues. So, nice work again. Let's take a listen to, 2, 3 stingers. Do it again. All right. Definitely could use a bit more low end, maybe, like they're the crash. Maybe it's just my headphones, but definitely watch the endings. If you need to have them last longer because of the reverb tail, that's fine. Especially this one. That one I think actually has the most interesting modulation element. The other ones seem to be a big hit and long reverb. So I would still add like a low end thump or sub, or maybe bass drop, something in there to offset and give it sort of 2 active regions of audio. So I think, yeah, you're headed in the right direction with those. Certainly the formatting thing is going to be the most obvious one. You don't want to have them cut off there. All right, so good submissions here. Again, it gives us a lot of good things to talk about. Even as you set up all of your audio in Wise, as you will be working on your assignments this week, you still have the opportunity to revise and change your music pretty much to the end of the project, end of the month, because you can take all of your audio as it currently is, put it into the game, test it out, play it, realize that there's issues, which is very, very common, because it's even professionally, it is a very educated guess all the way up until you get it into the game, and then you say, oh, well, that's how it sounds. My ideas were not particularly correct. I had, maybe I got 70, 80, 85% of the way there, but there's the last percentage that I need to kind of go back and rework things, and now that I have seen it and heard it, it'll become a whole lot easier to do another pass. So if you go then get everything into Wise, check it all out, then if you need to, go back into Logic, go back into your DAW, redo your music, update it, revise it, bounce it all out. As long as it's named exactly the same thing and formatted the same way, when you will just take the new file, you'll drag it back into Wise, and it'll say, hey, this file already exists. Do you want to replace it? You say yes, and you won't have to do anything down the line. Everything that you had already set up in Wise will remain the same. It'll just change out the original WAV file. So definitely wanted to bring that to your attention so that you can make sure that you ultimately, the purpose here is to revise your music, revise your project, and get the best possible version to create a demo reel video and a kind of a final demo piece that you can add to your portfolio. So that's the intention overall. We'll turn it over now to the archive, which will describe how things are set up in Wise, how you can approach both your 2D platformer and your Angry Bots Wise implementation, plus your chiptune composition. So if you have any questions, please reach out to me this week. I will be going through and grading all of your Angry Bots submissions from week 2, so look out for that through this week. Yeah, let me know if you have any questions or issues, but other than that, we'll meet again on Thursday. If you want to discuss any aspects about the project or bring in any composition to listen to before submitting it by the end of the week, we can certainly do that, or revisions or whatever you want. So we'll be here on Thursday again. Other than that, have a good rest of your day, and I will see you again Thursday. Thanks. Switch from the week 2 assignments into the new week 3 assignments. And I want to go over just a few of the aspects of how to set up your Wise session, how to use Wise, of course, and how to import your music and your sound effects and get them working in the game. There's a couple of things that will you want to make sure that you start from the very beginning to make sure that this is all going to work correctly for you. And the first one is to make sure that you have the proper version of Wise set up and installed. So for this month, we are using the Wise version 2016, and my version will load up here on this end in just a sec. Make sure you have the correct version of Wise installed. If not, you would go back to the Audio Kinetic webpage and install the correct version, which looks like this. Hold on just a sec. Come here. Come here, webpage. You would go to Audio Kinetic's web page and download Wise over here. This is going to download the Wise launcher, which looks like this, the Wise launcher. And in here, you want to make sure that you've gone to Wise. I'll do this later. You go to Wise, and you want to make sure that the version's installed. One of them says 2016 on it. If not, then you can do install new versions and make sure you have a 2016 version installed. It shouldn't matter which one you do, but just go for the most recent one, the biggest number, right? Which at the time of filming is 2016.2.6.6153. Just get the newest one and install that, and when you launch, it will look something like this. So, now, first and foremost, you need to have the correct version of Wise installed, and there's more detailed instructions on FSO to get that installed. The next thing would be to have a couple of files set up on your desktop to make this project work. So what we are going to do is we'll go to FSO here and show you all of the files that you have to download. So let me find that real quick. I am going to go, let me get to the correct class first. All right, so here we are in week 3. You should download everything, go through and watch the WISE overview video that is an overview of WISE. It leads you through windows and menus and the overall structure of your files. And you'll download also the 2D Platformer WISE setup and AngryBots WISE setup. We'll be talking about that next week, or not next week, on our next session, and our chiptune composition, which I'll also talk about today. So let's start out here with our 2D Platformer WISE setup. In here, there's a video that will recreate a lot of what I'm saying here. So there's a bit more detailed information there. And there's also all of the downloads for the assignment. There's a PDF that also follows along step by step with all of this process. You can download the video from above, but make sure you download this 2D Platformer WISE zip file. This is the session that we will be using. So make sure you have a copy of that downloaded. You're also going to need a copy of the game, which you should already have downloaded. But if you need to find, again, a copy of the game, you can go back to week 1, where we started 2D Platformer. Go to the game composition assignment and re-download this zip file. That's where the copy of the game is. So let's go ahead and set up a couple of things that we need to. The first thing I'm going to do is just create a folder. I'm going to do this all on my desktop, and I recommend that you do the same while you are working on the project so that all of the files are easily accessible. I'm going to name this 2D Platformer. And in this folder, I'm going to take that zip file that we just downloaded from FSO. I'm going to unzip it. I don't need the zip file after that. So I'll just take that folder. This is the WISE project that is provided. This is what we're going to use with all of the files that we need. So we'll just start with a copy of that. Then we're going to get a copy of the game, as I mentioned before. Go into your downloaded version of the game application and make sure that these two files are next to each other. This is extremely important to make sure that this works properly. If the 2D Platformer file is not there, right next to this 2D Platformer WISE folder, it will not work, which is also stated here on FSO. In the assignments, if these two files, warning, make sure you have these two files next to each other or things will not work, right? So make sure if you are having any sort of issues at the end of this process, make sure that you have everything set up correctly. It will solve a lot of any sort of troubleshooting you might encounter. All right, the other thing we're going to do is create a folder called Media. And in this media folder, I'm going to create another folder called Music. If I can spell it right, Music. And I'll create another one called Sound Effects. And this is, I'm going to put all of my music and sound effects in here that I created, just so I can have quick and easy access to those. So let me do that real quick. Let's see. I'm going to go back to my original composition files and a copy of my sound effects and bring them in there, which looks like this. So I'm going to go get all of my music files. I'm going to take a copy of those. Let's try that again. Drop my music in my music folder. I'm going to back up, go find all of my sound effects. Should have 18 sound effects. And I'm going to make a copy and put that in my sound effects folder. And this is for no reason other than to have very quick, easy access to all the files that I need. All right, at this point, I can launch Wise and make sure I open up the project to get started somewhere. It would load up. Should just be patient here. And we are going to navigate to the project that we need. You probably don't have this project right here. Your recent projects is probably blank. And we just need to hit Open Other and then navigate to that project, which is on your desktop. It's called 2D Platformer. You're going to go to 2D Platformer Wise. And then you're going to find this 2D Platformer Wise project, the wproj file. This is the session. Double click that and Wise will load it up. It provides you with all of the setup that you need to get started on the project. So we are going to start out by working on the music. We're going to get that set up. And then we are also going to set up the sound effects. And I will kind of go through it at a quicker pace here. It is explained in a bit more detail in the other videos, but I do want to kind of show an overview of how this is going to work. All right, so we have different layouts that we'll be using. We'll mostly be alternating between the designer layout and the interactive music layout. And I'm also going to be spending time switching between the audio tab, the events tab, and the soundbanks tab. So audio is where all of my audio is going to go. I'm going to import all of my WAV files here. I'm going to set them up and make them work appropriately for the game. Audio is added to events. And events are the messages that are sent from the game into Wise. The game has no idea about your music or your sound effects, has no idea about the audio. All it knows is that if it calls out these commands or these messages, that Wise will respond and play the correct audio file. So all we're going to have control over is when the music begins and when it ends. And this will create all of the interactivity that we need for our music. And then whenever we need a particular sound effect in the game just calls one of these events and it plays the corresponding sound. We'll have to set that up, but that is our overall approach with our events. So audio is attached to events, and both audio and events end up in sound banks. Sound banks are one of the final formats that is used by the game itself. When you are done with your session, you do not bounce a file like you do in a DAW. You create your entire composition and you bounce out the final version. Here in Wise, you are going to build the project. And when you build the project, it creates a couple of files that the game can use to actually play back while somebody is playing the game. When you go to sell and distribute your game, you do not want to have a whole bunch of loose WAV files sitting on the game disk that everybody can steal and change and have access to copyrighted material. So instead, these sound banks will encrypt the files. It will take all of your WAV files, all of the data that you put into Wise, and encrypt it in something. It's not really a zip file, but it can kind of sort of be thought of as a zip file, where it's a file that contains a whole bunch of other files that is encrypted and compressed, and also is set up to work on multiple different platforms. So Wise speaks the language of a Nintendo Switch or a PlayStation, a Sony PlayStation, or a Microsoft Xbox, or an iOS or an Android device. It speaks all of these different languages, and the sound bank converts all of the files and is the file that the game actually uses. So this is just a quick overview of the types of files we'll be interacting with. So we're going to start out by creating the music system. Setting up the music to work properly in the game. We have two events, when the music begins and when the music ends. So already set up in the game, when the game starts, it calls out this command or this event called play music begin. So when the game starts, this is what we want to do with your music. You have 3 intro files. The game is going to randomly choose one of them. It's going to play that file. Then when it's done, it's going to transition into the main loops. Then there are 3 main loops. It is going to randomly choose a main loop file and play it all the way through until it's done. Then it plays the next main loop file. Randomly chooses another one, plays all the way through that, and then it'll randomly choose another one, and keep doing that forever until the game is over. When the game is over when you when you lose all of your health. The game is over when the character falls off the level, kind of falls into the sludge down below. When the game is over, musically, we want any music that was playing, we want that to stop. And then when it does, then we're going to play one of the 3 ending cues. Randomly choose an ending and play it. And then it will play it once, it'll stop, and then the whole game will start all over again. So that's a general setup of our music. We start out in the audio tab here, and we are going to drag our music to drag our music to this default work unit in the interactive music hierarchy. We have a master mixer hierarchy, we have an actor mixer hierarchy, we have an interactive music hierarchy. I think these are long, drawn-out ways of saying something pretty simple. The master mixer hierarchy is all of our buses. This is our master output bus. If we had a dialogue bus, a music bus, a sound effects bus, if we had different groups of sounds or instruments or music together, this will contain all of our buses to organize it. Actor mixer is all of the sound effects. When we set up all of our sound effects, we're going to drag the WAV files here. We are going to set them up appropriately. The interactive music hierarchy is for the music. So basically we have buses, sound effects, and music. Each one of these has something called a default work unit. And we actually will not be using these default work units except for to basically organize our files. We are not, the basics of a default work unit allows multiple people to work on the same session at the same time or at different times. So a default work unit is a unit of work. It's some files, it's some process that you want to do, and you are going to take that work, move it over to your computer, work in your session, and then bring it back into the main session. Since everybody is working on their own individual projects, we're really not using these to their full potential, and it's not necessary. But if you were working on a large team, it allows you to separate the work that's done by everybody and still bring it back together in a session that makes sense. All right, so we're going to start out with our music. I'm going to go back to the folder where we created and imported all the files that we needed, or kind of organized all the files we needed. I'm going to go to my music here, and I'm going to drag these into the interactive music hierarchy. And I am going to drop them right on the default work unit here. So I dragged all of these files down here right on top of this default work unit. And this audio file importer window pops up. Right now, the default is perfectly fine, and we can hit import at this point. There's a lot of settings that you could set up here if you had specific uses for the files, but the defaults will work just fine. We can hit import. It's going to import all of our files. We now see our music endings, our intros, and our loops in Wise. And we need to set up a way for these files to play back together. Right now, they're just individual, so we need to group them together in certain ways so that they play back correctly in the game. If you were going to load up a whole bunch of music for a party and you put it into iTunes or your favorite music player and you wanted to sequence them to play in a certain order, you would put them in a playlist. Playlist is a very common term for kind of sequencing music together, and we are going to do the same thing here. We are going to put our intros and our main loops together in a playlist so that when the game starts, it's going to play back these files correctly. I can highlight all of these files, and then I can put them together in a playlist. Let's see here. Can I widen this out? Show me all the buttons. Let's see. There we go. Sorry. Before I highlight all of these, I'm going to click on the default work unit up here, and this button right here in the middle says Create New Playlist, Music Playlist Container. This is the icon that we're going to use to create that container. Everything in Wise is a container. Well, not everything, but containers contain other files. That's mainly the approach that they're going for with that terminology. But if we want to now highlight all of these intros and main loops, we can drag them into the playlist container. And we're going to rename this. I can either rename it over here. I can right-click and choose Rename. And I'm going to call this Music Playlist, no, Music, sorry, Begin underscore Playlist. All right, so a playlist allows us to sequence our files together. We have these files set up. I'm going to create another playlist. I'm going to click back on my default work unit, and I'm going to click this icon for another playlist, and I'm going to call this Music End underscore Playlist. I'm going to drag all of my endings here. And now, this kind of organizes them together, but it doesn't actually set up any sort of order or sequence for these playlists. And that is done in the interactive music layout. If I go to the layouts menu, I choose interactive music, and it gives, the windows change a little bit, and I need to go down here. This portion is called the music playlist editor. So if I click on playlists, I can see the appropriate order of all the files. So I'm going to start out up here, Music Begin Playlist. It's empty right now, so I'm going to drag in all of these intro files one at a time. Unfortunately, you cannot select and highlight multiple files at the same time and drag them in. Just click on each one of them, drag it into the playlist. If you accidentally click off of the playlist, you'll see these waveforms. If somehow you get lost in here, you see these waveforms, always click back on the playlist. We'll get you back to the playlist editor. This is one of the more tedious and difficult aspects of making this work is just kind of navigating around. Make sure you always select back to the playlist, and you can have your 3 intros and your main loops playing here. All right. Now, this playlist says sequence continuous. That means it's going to play these in a sequence continuously. It's going to start at intro 1, and then it's going to play intro 2, then intro 3, then main loop 1, 2, and 3, which is not at all what we want to do. So let's start here. All right, so it plays them in order, which is, like I said, not at all what we want. We want of the 3 intros, we want one of them to be chosen once, and then it's going to move into the main loops, and we want it to then randomly choose main loops infinitely, and just do it over and over again. So we need to group these files together. We have the intro group and the main loop group. I am going to click on my sequence continuous segment up here, so I guess it would be a group. I'm going to create new groups. Sometimes if it puts a group inside of another group, you can just kind of drag them out of each other. You want to make sure that each of the groups are on the same level. So we're going to drag these 3 intros in here. Intro 1, 2, and 3. Oops, I missed. All right, there's intro 1, 2, and 3. Then we're going to go main loop 1, 2, and 3. All right, so this still doesn't solve anything because, again, sequence continuous plays them in a sequence continuously. It's going to go from the first one down into the first group here. It's going to play 1, 2, and 3, down to the second group, main loop 1, 2, and 3, and then be done. So we have a couple of different options here. We have sequence continuous, sequence step, random continuous, and random step. So we have sequence, the words sequence and random, and continuous and step. Sequence means it plays them in order. Random means it plays them in a random order. Continuous means that when the first one is done, it'll play the next one. Step means that you have to hit play each time, or you have to trigger the event each time for it to move forward. It will randomly set something up or play it in sequence, but it has to be poked each time to make it work. So in this case, the top layer needs to be sequence continuous because once it goes from this, we want it to go down to here. But when it goes into the intro group, we want it to randomly choose it, but we only want that to happen once. So we're going to choose that to random step. So it's going to randomly fire one of these off and play it one time, and then it's going to go down to the next one. This one we're also going to set to random step. So it's going to come down to this one, randomly choose one of them, and only play it one time though, which is not what we want for the main loops because we want that to go on infinitely. So there's this other column over here called loop count. It says how many times do you want it to do that thing. And for the main loops, you want it to do it infinitely. If you hit the down arrow on this second main loop group, you can switch it to infinite, and it will play through this section. It will randomly choose one of them, fall out, but come back through this loop infinitely for as long as the game is being played. So let's try this out. If I click this main music begin playlist and hit play, it's going to randomly choose an intro, but only do that once, and then jump down into the main loops and hopefully do this infinitely. So it is switching, and it's doing exactly what we wanted it to. So random step, will work for each one of your groups, and you want to set the music to be infinite. If it only plays one time and stops, we want to make sure that we want to set it to play infinitely. All right. So this is how this playlist should work. Let's go to our music end playlist. This is going to be really simple. We're just going to drag all three of our endings in here and set it to random step so that it just does this once. Randomly chooses an ending, plays it, and then it's over. The game will start over again, and all of the music will start again. All right, so this is how the audio is set up, but this doesn't set up the events. Once we have the WAV files controlling as we want them, I'm just going to go up to Project here. I'm going to do Project Save. We should have probably done that a while ago, but Save. Also notice that it's not Command S, it is Control S to save properly in 2D platformer. For reasons that the application kind of thinks it's a Windows application, but it's just wrapped and running on Mac. So I just typically just go hit File Save to be sure. All right, now we have set up our audio. Now it's time to move on to the events. We have two events. We have Music Begin and Music End. So setting up the Music Begin should be pretty straightforward. All we need to do is to play this Music Begin playlist. So let me take a step back here. Events have actions. There's anytime you click on one of these events over here, you're going to get access to these double arrows, and you have different actions like play, break, which will allow you to kind of pause and move on to the next thing. Post event, which will allow you to trigger any other events. You can stop, you can pause, you can mute, you can change a bus volume, you can change an individual audio file's voice volume, you can change the voice pitch, you can add a low pass filter, a high pass filter, you can change mix states, you can turn on and off switches, change game parameters. There's a lot of different things that you can do from these events. Remember, these are the messages that are sent from the game. The game knows nothing about your audio file. It just calls out these different events, and Wise takes care of the rest. So this Music Begin playlist, we want to play something, and then we hit Browse. When you hit Browse, it may look like this. It maybe looks like this, and it's kind of grayed out. Doesn't look like there's anything to choose. But if you go to the, let's see here, where is it hidden? What did I do here? I do play, browse. I go to the actor mixer hierarchy, and the interactive music hierarchy. I'm in my music. And I want to play this Music Begin playlist. Once I hit OK, well, actually, you want to play the Music Begin playlist. You do not want to play any of the individual files, or it'll just play that one file. You set up all the interactivity in the playlist, so make sure you trigger that. At this point, if I hit play, it will play that event. Notice it says Play Music Begin down here in the transport, so you know which event you're playing. And it starts playing that playlist. And it gets to the part where it randomizes, and it will do that infinitely. So next is the End playlist. The End event. The first thing we want to do is we want to stop the Music Begin playlist. Anything that was playing, no matter where you were, when the game is over, you're going to turn it off. So we have the play event. We also have a stop event. We want to stop just this one file. We don't want to stop everything. You could stop all of the audio in the game if you wanted to. Probably wouldn't be a very good idea right now. But we hit stop, and we want to stop that Music Begin playlist. That will cut off the previous music. Now we want to play. And we'll hit Browse again, and we want to play the ending. Oops, let me try that again. Hit Browse. We want to play the ending cue. All right, so when the game is over, it's going to call out Play Music End. That's going to stop the music that was playing and play just one of the random files in the end playlist. All right. So that should set up our music. Let's hit play. Let's hit begin. Let's go over to the ending. And it should stop, end there, and be done. All right. So I'm going to go back to Project Save. Now that I have my music set up, I am going to go back to the Audio tab, and now I'm going to tackle the sound effects. These should be pretty straightforward. Most of it is just you have the events. Again, the events are really important. It tells you all of the files or all of the messages that the game can speak, all of the messages that it can send you, and you basically need to respond with audio. And you'll see these match the sound effects. Bomb boom, bomb fuse, bomb pickup, bomb set down, enemy death, gunshot, health pickup, jump, ouch, and taunt. So we need to set up these events. We need to start over in the Audio tab. We are going to work on the actor mixer hierarchy now on this default work unit. This is for the sound effects. I'm going to go back over to my sound effects over here, and I'm just going to highlight all of my WAV files. Again, this is why we kind of organized it all together so you have quick access. Highlight all of my WAV files and drag them into my actor mixer hierarchy. You want to make sure you go on that default work unit right here. Make sure you drag onto that. And once you do, then you can see this audio file importer screen. Again, all of the files should be just fine, so we're going to hit import. I'll just go to Project Save. And now I have all of my WAV files. They'll start out blue. Blue audio files mean that they have not been converted yet into the format that is necessary for the game. This will happen when you build the sound bank. One of the things the sound bank does is compress all the files, convert them, change them into any formats that are necessary. But for the time being, it should work just fine that they are blue, but it throws some people off when they see the different color there. So most of these are fine. If I just go ahead and play a sound, we hear the sounds being played.
Bums away.
So one thing we need to do are for these files that have multiple different versions. Enemy death 1, 2, and 3. Jump 1, 2, and 3. Ouch 1, 2, and 3. And taunt 1, 2, and 3. We want them in a single event, or each one of them has their own kind of single event. We don't want the 3 files to be played at the same time, so we want to randomize them. So I'm going to click on this default work unit again. And up here, this icon that looks like all the little dots at the top, this is called a random container. And a random container allows you to randomize files. Anytime it asks, it's just going to randomly feed it a file. So we're going to create a couple of these, and I'm going to name them SFX enemy death. Probably don't need to capitalize everything. Then I'm going to create another one. Each time I'm going to click on the default work unit. I'm going to click this icon here to create another random container. And I'll just create a couple of them, so I don't have to keep going back. All right, the next one, I am going to go SFX, and I'm going to name this jump. I'll just right click this time and do rename. Oh, let's try that again. There we go. This time I'm going to call it SFX ouch. And the last one here is SFX taunt. There we go. So I'm going to take all of my enemy death files. I'm going to drag them into enemy death. I'm going to take all of my ouch files and drag them into ouch. I'm going to take all of my taunt files and drag them into taunt. Going to take all of my jump files and drag them into jump. All right. So this should get all of our audio files set up for the game. I'm just going to, again, go back to Project Save. Now all we need to do is set up the events, which should always, each one of these should be real simple to do. So all we need to do is go ahead. We are going to play a file. We can hit Browse. And this time I'm going to go up here to my actor mixer hierarchy. This is Bomb Boom, so I'm going to choose Bomb Boom. You don't even go to the next one. You don't even have to hit play in this. It'll just do it automatically. If you hit Browse, this is Bomb Fuse, so I'll set that one up. This is Bomb Pickup. I'll hit Browse, and I'll choose Pickup. I'll go to Set Down, hit Browse, choose Set Down, go to Enemy Death, hit Browse. This time I want to make sure I choose the random container. Do not choose the individual files. You want to use the random container itself. So I'll set that one up. There's Enemy Death. Here's Gunshot. Browse. Gunshot. Health Pickup. Browse. Health Pickup. Jump. Again, I've selected the jump random container. Ouch. Select ouch random container. Taunt. Select taunt random container. All right. Now I have messages. Seem to work. All right. At this point, I am ready to go. I can build the game, or I can build the project and test it out in the game to make sure everything is playing back properly. And this is done by going to the Layouts menu again, and we're going to choose Sound Bank. And over here in the Sound Bank, you'll notice that there's one Sound Bank here called Sound Bank. It is set up for the Mac platform, and the English is set to, the language is set to English. So we're ready to go. All we should have to do at this point is hit Generate. And when you hit Generate, this message will pop up, and it says Evaluation Mode. Sound banks contain 27 media items out of 200. It gives you this generic message, and it should have built all of the files correctly. The way you can test this out is you go out of Wise, and you go to this game application that we brought into this folder. Now, when early on, we made sure that this application is next to this folder so that when you hit Generate, it actually backs out of all of this 2D Platformer Wise folder and knows to go into here. And then let me show you the location that it drops the files. If we do Show Package Contents, we can actually get a folder structure of this application. Go to Apps, go to Contents. Resources. Now you don't actually have to do this, but it'll show you what's going on here. In Resources, we'll go to Data. In Data, we'll go to Streaming Assets. In Streaming Assets, we will go to Audio. We'll go to Generated Sound Banks and the Mac folder. And right here today, at the current time, it shows that we have created this file. The setup that we have done in Wise is now going to play back in the game. So now let me back out of all of this, and you can now run the game application and hear your music and sound effects play. There is a little bit more information about how to appropriately mix and how to adjust levels. I'll leave that up for the video game. Well, you have to do it for the video game. I'll leave that up for the video. To explain a bit more detail, but that should get you up and running and make things work properly for the game. Again, if you reach this point and you are in Wise and you have generated here and the message that pops up is in red and it gives you all sorts of errors, read the errors, make sure that you're not missing a file. Sometimes it's complaining about the setup inside of Wise. Or other times, if you go try to play the music and you don't hear anything, it would be the fact that this 2D platformer application and the 2D platformer Wise folders were not next to each other when you built. So double check that. Or if you have any other issues, please get in contact with us, and your instructor can help you out. So, what else? Let me go back to here. That's the overall approach for 2D platformer. And on Thursday, we'll talk a bit more on Angry Bots. I'll point out a few more interesting approaches for how Angry Bots will be set up in Wise. Please work on these projects throughout the week so that we can answer any questions before the weekend. Don't leave it to Sunday night in case any sort of issues come about. And the last project I want to discuss here is your chiptune composition. It's not entirely Wise. We do have a composition this week. We will listen in peer review next week for anybody that submits. But this is a composition in the style of the original Nintendo platform. It is a traditional linear composition. It doesn't have to loop. It's not interactive in any sort of way. The composition itself is 1 minute to 2 minutes long. And I'm most interested that you are following the restrictions of the original Nintendo system to kind of get a sense of what composition was like back in these earlier systems overall. And so with this project, I was a bit hesitant at first when we started this, thinking that it would end in less than optimal compositions, less than listenable music because of the limitations of the sounds. The sounds don't really sound all that great or aren't as interesting or complex compared to modern synths and DAWs. But what I ended up finding is that most people end up having your focus on the composition a whole lot more, and you're not hiding behind kind of the production and the sounds and things like arpeggiators and drum machines that will do it all for you. And so this there's a strong focus on the composition and the development of the music. So again, there is about a minute long composition. When you download the project, you get a session that a Logic session that provides all of the sounds that you are going to be using for this composition, for this project. So some of the main restrictions are, number one, you have to use the sounds that are provided with the project. Those come in the form of EXS24 sound banks. If you click on any one of these tracks, they are all equipped with EXS24, and you have a couple of presets that were sampled directly from the original Nintendo and Famicom systems. And so these are very simple, straightforward effects. They're not all that wonderful sounding, but they are very musical, very melodic, and so you might spend more time at a faster pace or with staccato instrumentation so that you don't stick too long on holding a chord, so that there's a lot more movement and energy to the mix. So let's see here. Can I even get something going? So provided are a couple of chiptune sound banks. Let's see here, like drums, and basic tones and synths. So you have to use the sounds that are provided by for the project. You are limited to only 4 simultaneous instruments playing at the same time. You can use more than 4 tracks. You just can't have more than 4 playing at any one time. So you can have as many as you want. 4. That means one of them has to be a drums, one of them has to be melody. You need drums and melody at some point in the composition. The other two, you could have drums, bass, harmony, melody. You could have drums, harmony, melody, melody, or like drums, harmony, melody, counter melody, or drums, melody, melody, melody. It depends on how you want to approach it. But you can have any combination as long as you have drums and a melodic idea. Of course, the progression, the melody all need to develop over the course of the minute or so composition. You can have more than 4 tracks. You just need to make sure that they are, there's only 4 of them playing at any one time. What else? So you have to use the sounds. You're limited to the number of tracks. You have to have drums. You have to have melody. Oh, the melody has to change at some point. In order to do that, you're probably best to duplicate a track. And let's see, track. Well, let me just do it this way. I'm thinking too hard. So duplicate the track. And then use another sound for your lead melody, but only 4 of them playing at any one time. So I have a couple of student submissions. These are some of the better ones that I've had, but it shows you the capability of what is possible. So here is the first one. Let's do it this way. Hold on, I want to make sure I have a volume control. One moment. All right, so this one really shows why faster, more staccato movements and a faster pace overall works very well to maintain energy from the cues or maintain energy through the piece. Especially this part right here. So faster arpeggiated parts, like arpeggios moving through the chord changes, work well to outline and give a lot of material to pull from. Here's the next one. Let's see, let's try this. So good energy, lots of changes also throughout. Big sweeps through chords. Having things on the quarter note, 8th note, 32nd, or 16th and 32nd gives a lot of room for all these changes. So, and each one of these is only 4 tracks playing at any one time. They're just constantly switching their sounds back and forth. All right, and one more. And there's just a whole lot of movement in here. again, these are kind of really classic chiptune approaches where you're repeating the notes or doing quick sweeps through arpeggios. All right, so a lot of activity, a lot of great ideas through each one of those. Certainly those are the top end of the spectrum of the overall quality, but hopefully gives you some inspiration about where these might go. All right, so that is all of the different aspects we wanted to talk about. We wanted to go over the week 2 submissions. Good job for everybody that did submit from the Angry Bots composition, and hopefully it inspires more people to submit for our chiptune peer review that we will do next week. And we talked about the 2D platformer assignment and the chiptune assignment. We'll dive into the Angry Bots later on this week. All right, so please let me know if you have any questions, and yeah, we'll keep moving forward. We'll get into next week and talk about wrapping everything up for the month. So, all right, let me know if you have any questions, and other than that, have a good day. Thanks.